start in Wesley?
1941.
So you're 1941. So you were in Wesley for how long?
6 years.
6 years then.
Yeah.
Okay.
47. Yeah.
And you travelled to school. It would have been back in Stephen's Green, would it?
Yes, Stephen's Green then, and we boarded in Stephen's Green, so everything we were there all the time. Whereas the girls were boarded up near the tennis club, and they had to walk up and down to school every day in their uniform or in whatever they were. We'd no uniform, so they had to walk up and down. But we were on the site there, and all weathers. You know, there was a big building of Wesley, and that's where I was, 41 to 47.
Okay. And of course, the war would have been going on then.
Yeah, 39. And a bomb had fallen in Dublin just before I went. The bomb had fallen in Dublin in April. And then I came up to Dublin in September.
Yes. Well, thanks so much for coming in to us today, Mr. Armitage. So, you were in school back in Wesley when it was back in Stephen's Green?
1945.
Yes. So, did you remember how you travelled to school back then, or?
I was a boarder. I grew up in Cloughjordan, County Tipperary, and some of my relatives before me had been in Wesley College. So I came as a boarder in 1945, travelled by train, and then my father hired a horse-drawn cab or something that brought me from Kingsbridge up to Wesley College in Stephen's Green.
Okay. And you said you had relatives that had attended. Did you have siblings there at the same time, or?
My elder brother James was still there, but only just for one term more. He left to go and train to be a farmer. He didn't finish his education in Wesley College.
And then, I'm sure, having walked around here recently, there are lots of differences between the school then and the school now.
Absolutely, you couldn't think it could be the same school, because we lived in Stephen's Green in quite an old building, and we walked nearly a mile 5 or 6 days a week to Bloomfield at the Royal Hospital, where we had rugby practices or cricket. And then there was a junior boys' residence, Burlington House, also nearly a mile away. They walked in and out every day, although they were boarders. Tullamaine was where the junior girls were. There was a junior school there, kindergarten, preparatory school. And then there was Epworth Hall, which was the senior girls' residence. They walked in and out every day, wet or fine. And it is now the headquarters for the Irish tennis company.
And when you were walking in the night, did you have coats, or if it was raining, did you just get wet?
We got wet frequently, and we were used to that. And the girls got wet, come in and out. We wore a navy Macintosh that was still part of the Wesley colours, and we had a school cap, a peaked cap, which you had to wear until perhaps you went into the 5th year. I think it was a privilege from the 5th year, 6th year. You didn't have to wear the school cap, I think.
And what subjects would you have done?
Subjects were history, geography, were amongst my favourite subjects, English, French, maths, science, Irish, which was of course compulsory. I think I've mentioned all the subjects there.
Okay, and I believe you were here, you would have been here for when the school was 100 years old then, would you?
Yes, I was here for that celebration, the 100th anniversary, yes. And I was in Nigeria teaching when this place was a farm with cows in it and was bought from the farmer. And I was due. I worked in Nigeria for 4 years, and I was coming home anyway. So the principal, Reverend Gerald Miles, had a job. So I came back here to be a housemaster, living in with the border boys.
And were you teaching at that point, or?
Yes, I was teaching as well. I was teaching history and geography were my two main subjects, but I did some religious education as well.
And what was it like then, coming back to be a teacher? Was it very different from the school that you had left?
Yes, it was totally different in that I was living down in Stephen's Green in an old building, and walked up Leeson Street to Bloomfield every day of the week, or not Sundays, but it could be Saturdays, because you could have a rugby match or something like that. So that was life there. Whereas when we came up here, we came into the countryside, onto a former farm where they were building a new school. We were still going into the old school, and some border boys were resident here to bring up the numbers for when the new school would be ready. So there was the house, which was owned by the previous owner. There were boys living in it, and every day they went in on a bus to Wesley College, to Stephen's Green, for a year until the new school was built.
And did you have like a staff uniform when you were teaching here, or?
No, the only thing we had was we wore a gown if we were teaching, and you had your BA or your MA. Normally the teachers wore gowns.
And did you have a very kind of structured day? Did you have the same now where you have like 9 classes and they're all 40 minutes, or?
Yes, everything was very structured, possibly maybe more than his, but I don't know what it's like today. But there was a system of bells would ring. So if you were a boarder, a bell rang when you should get up. Of course, you left that till the last minute. Then a bell rang for breakfast, and then another bell rang for classes, for assembly to begin, because we had short prayers before assembly, and then a bell rang when you changed to go from one classroom to another teacher, and a bell would ring for lunchtime, and back to school, another bell, and so on. We went by the bells.
What are the kind of differences between like the way it was in Stephen's Green versus kind of the current school?
It was 90 boarders in Stephen's Green when I came out, left Wesley. The school was 300 and something, so there were 90 boarders, and we very plain food as boarders, and we had. But we just, I don't know, we went on as we never thought anything about it, I suppose.
Yeah, okay. And what subjects did you do then?
Everybody did the same subjects up to Inter, and then after Inter we separated a bit, but we did English and Irish, history, geography, mathematics obviously, a bit of science. It must be just the ordinary school subjects, and we just went.
It's much the same as it would be now.
Yes, and we 3 streams.
Okay, yeah.
3 streams, yes.
Yeah. And then after Intercert, what did you do?
Well, Wesley always had a scholarship called Sizership into Trinity, and we competed with that every year with a special class set out, and because there was no class ahead of me, I was promoted with 3 others up to Form 6, and I did nothing but mathematics my last 3 years in school. I was supposed to do English and Irish, but I did very little, so I did nothing but maths for 3 years.
Wow, okay. And what was the uniform like?
No uniform.
No uniform.
During the war, we just wore our ordinary clothes.
Okay.
And the girls might have had uniform, but the boys just wore their ordinary clothes. It's only when Mr. Miles came back as headmaster that blazer started again and trousers.
Okay.
So we just our ordinary clothes, yeah.
Yeah. And then were there girls in all of your classes, or?
Yeah, well, yes, they're all mixed, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. They had two girls boarding houses, one for the very junior and one for the senior ones at Epworth. And they walked up and down to school every day. So that it's all mixed.
Yeah.
I think the only class that wasn't mixed was they had a class for business studies, like that sort of style, and that was all girls. I don't think the boys did that at all.
Okay.
But that was unusual.
Yeah. And then, of course, this is all for the celebration of 175 years here in Wesley. So you were then in school for the centenary celebrations.
Yes, senior
Do you remember much from them?
I remember that well, yes. Because I remember I was in Form 5 then, I think it was, or Form 6, Form 5 maybe, and did a big dinner, which we weren't. I think maybe two people might have gone to it. Did a big dinner and the celebrations and we didn't make much of it really at the time. We did a bit, I suppose, but I don't remember any special celebration for the boys at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then, of course, your family. There's many generations of them that have been through Wesley now. So,
Yeah.
do you want to tell us a bit more about that?
Well, my mother went to Wesley. She came up to Wesley from a place called Ballineen, County Cork, and she came up with her sister in 1915, which she was the third class of Wesley, third class of girls that went to Wesley. And they came up from West Cork, her and her sister, up to Wesley. Amazing really for that time. And she succeeded me. But we wouldn't have known much about that because my father was a Methodist minister in Abbeyleix. And I just came up from Abbeyleix and he drove me up in the car because he had a car at that time and started. But we wouldn't have known my mother was in Wesley at that time, had been in Wesley.
Okay. Yeah. And then, obviously, the crest has probably changed over the years. Do you remember what it was like
Yes.
back then?
I'm amazed really that I didn't know till now that there was a different, the badge on the cap that is there, just a Dublin badge, and yet the badge is different. I don't remember. That shocked me. It didn't shock me, but I was very surprised.
Yeah, okay. And then, were there badges for swimmers back then?
No. During the war, there was very much a cut down on swimming pools were closed during the war to allow for there was no spread of diseases. And if you were in a boarding school, we were in a boarding school, did very well in the school's cup we would have done. But one of the boys in the boarding school got measles, so we had to scratch out of all the competitions. They were very keen to stop, during the war, very keen to stop diseases, when measles and scarlet fever and these sort of things. So that meant that really we no swimming.
Okay.
Because that Ivy baths would have been but that was stopped too, and people went there when they got, I'm forgetting about one of these skin things, and there's automatically, they were very, very strict about diseases like measles. I got measles one year, scarlet fever another year, flu another year. Each year we used to get something in the autumn term and the spring term. So that.
Okay. And then, did you find that Wesley was a happy place? Do you have happy memories?
Oh yes, I was very happy in the sense I wasn't sad then and that mean, but I wasn't. When I went up and down, just that's the way. I can't, I definitely wasn't sad, but I was happy. Yes,
Yeah.
I was. We had a good life. We enjoyed ourselves together as boarders, and I definitely enjoyed it. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you have any other kind of memories of particular events that stood out or anything?
Well, One event I remember, which is little, I remember as a boarder and prayers in the morning, we all went for prayers. The headmaster of Wesley was a man called Dr. Irwin, and he'd been headmaster when my mother was there. And he'd come to Wesley in 1900, and he was still headmaster in 1947. So that I remember in whatever year it was, I was at that. We heard the rumour that in Europe had been invaded. You know what I mean? I was absolutely amazed, knowing my mother, that she and her sister would have come up, because my grandfather would never been out. They had no car. They had a trap, and to think of her coming up here as such a shy person with her sister in 1915, I think it was. I've seen the class list with her there. The headmaster at the time was Dr. Owen, and her name was there in the class list, and then her sister's name, but he hadn't got her sister's name, so he wrote Miss Hosford. He didn't put the names for some reason or other, but they came up by train, I suppose. It was absolutely amazing to me that they would come up. But the two girls who had never been out of the farm possibly much, coming up to Wesley and then getting off at Kingsbridge and getting to get a taxi, whatever, out to Stephen's Green where they're born. Now this was during the war, and it still amazes me that she came like that. But there were I don't know how many years she was there, but she was there, and then went back to.
Okay, so thanks so much for coming in to us today. Just kind of, what years did you attend Wesley?
1949 to 1957.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what was school life like then?
Well, it was very enjoyable. Nothing like what it's like now. We were quite well behaved, I think. We get into detention now and again, but mainly for talking. And we enjoyed our sport, and what else? We had the chapel, of course, so we went to chapel every morning and had service there, which was very nice. And we enjoyed ourselves, and I don't think there was anything specific that, we went to our usual classes, and I think that was about all I would think.
What sports did you play?
We played hockey and tennis, and that was it really for the girls.
Okay.
We'd no badminton or anything like that because we didn't really have a sports hall.
Yeah.
We had a main hall, an assembly hall, but no sports were played in that.
Yeah.
So.
And you mentioned the chapel, so you went up every day, did you?
Every day we went to chapel, yeah.
Yeah.
We lined up, we went in a nice orderly fashion. Prefects stood along the route to make sure we weren't running or things like that.
Yeah, okay. And did you find that monotonous at all, or was it enjoyable?
No, we quite enjoyed it. It was quite good. We had hymns, and we didn't have a sermon or anything like that, just maybe a reading or something. It was quite nice to start the day off like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have siblings at Wesley as well, or was it just you?
No, I have a brother, but he didn't go to Wesley. My father went to Wesley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, okay. And then, of course, it was in Stephen's Green.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it very different to now, or?
Well, the school itself was totally different.
Yeah.
And very little space. There was just one playground at the back, which the girls weren't allowed out there. The boys were allowed out there. The girls had what they called the gym. It wasn't really a gym at all, as you know it. It was just a part of a room more or less in the basement. And the day girls had their lunch there, and but we weren't allowed out to play with the lads.
Okay. How did you travel to school?
I travelled by train, bus, bicycle, any of those. Bicycle not that often because it was very hilly coming home.
Okay, yeah.
But train to Harcourt Street, which is now no longer there. The train station is, I think it's a disco or something now. It's where the Lewis stops outside it.
Yeah.
And it'd walk down, and the bus would bring us right down to Stephen's Green.
Okay. Yeah. So you didn't board then, did you not?
No.
Okay.
I used to think I would quite like to be a boarder, but the boarders thought I was mad because they probably didn't enjoy boarding as much. It was fairly basic boarding. They had no luxuries or anything.
Yeah.
very different to today then.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
And they didn't get home. They might have
Okay.
got home at half term, maybe.
Yeah, of course. What was your uniform like?
We had it was a gym slip, they called it. You might call it a pinafore, but it had pleats, 3 pleats, and sort of hung from the shoulders. It had a what you might call a kris. We called it a girdle, a red girdle to match the red blouses, and black stockings to start with, which
Okay.
were not very popular. And before we left, we got. We were delighted because we got socks to wear for hockey, navy with the red top on them, instead of wearing these awful old thick black stockings. So that was a big plus.
Yeah, okay. Would you be able to tell, like, of course the uniforms changed over the years. One thing that has changed is apparently the crest has changed.
It
Are
has.
you aware of that, or?
Yes, well I would notice, because we didn't have the motto. Is that the motto? Oh no, you just have Wesley College on the bottom. It was just the shield
Okay.
that we had. We had it on our berries, and we had to wear those berries, or the boys wore their caps.
Yeah.
And you'd be in big trouble if you didn't
Okay.
wear those.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. One thing that I discovered, you have a badge for being a mentor.
Okay.
Well, that is what we had as a prefect's badge.
Prefect's badge,
Instead of
okay,
mentor
yeah.
underneath, we had prefect.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Because my granddaughter and her friend were amazed to see that.
Wow. Okay. And what subjects would you have studied?
Irish, English, maths, Latin, history, geography, experimental science we did, which would be your physics and chemistry, I suppose, and then domestic science,
Okay.
which would be home economics.
Yeah. Okay. And were there boys in all those classes, or? Was there
Yes, except for the domestic science. They
Okay.
didn't do it then.
Okay. And then there's lots of generations of your family going back through the school. Could you?
Well, my father went, and he was a boarder, and he enjoyed himself, I think. He was big into rugby. He was captain of the rugby team. His picture's over in the house over there. You know, they have the pictures, the photographs up on the wall there.
Yeah.
Which is quite nice, because one of our sons was captain of the rugby, and his picture's up there, photograph.
Okay. Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah, and then was there have been, like, nowadays there's kind of sports and clubs and stuff. Was there as much of that back then?
There was a debating society, and we had a dramatic society. They put on a play every year, which was one of the highlights of the year. The play. I can't really remember the plays. One was a Bernard Shaw one. I can't really remember what the other ones were. Debating. We didn't have any clubs like Stamp Club or Maths Club or anything like that.
Yeah.
No. I think debating was the only one, really. And we used to go up to, we played most of our hockey in Tullamaine, which is now the Burlington Hotel. And but once a week, the first 11 and maybe the junior team went up to Serpentine Avenue. It was Pembroke Wanderers grounds, but it was probably a bigger pitch and everything. So that was a bit of a highlight of the week when we went up there.
So you were quite successful overall, were you?
Well, the hockey overall was quite successful.
Hockey overall.
Yes. I mightn't have been on the teams, but we did win quite a few cups during the time I was in Wesley.
Okay, yeah.
I do remember the last year when I was on the senior team, we were beaten 1-0, and we actually, one of our best players was off sick, our goalie, I think, and we had another very good player. Oh, you don't want to know this, I don't.
No, keep going, yeah. Keep going.
Anyway, we were disgusted because the coach put us, our very good player, centre forward, say, into the goal because the goalie was missing. So we thought that was a bad step. Anyway, we lost the match. So.
Yes.
But they did win quite a few matches over the years. Yeah.
So then, say at lunch, would you have stayed in the grounds mostly? Or?
Well, we had to stay in this gym.
Yeah.
But in the summertime, the day girls were allowed to go across to Stephen's Green. Once we'd eaten our lunch, a teacher would take us across the road into Stephen's Green for about 10 or 15 minutes is all we had, but at least we got a breath of fresh air. Otherwise we were stuck downstairs.
Okay. Nice. And then you've brought along your prefect badge.
Yes, yeah, that was our prefect's badge. And then in days gone by, they had what they called the Good Conduct Medal. And my father won that. Now, it was voted, I think, by the pupils, so it certainly wasn't a Good Conduct Medal. But the medal itself, and actually I think Tim has it, is exactly the same as you have medals for high achievement, academic achievement, and the medal is exactly the same replica as this particular medal was.
Okay.
So that's quite interesting.
Were there any kind of staff members or teachers that made a particular lasting impression on you?
Well, there were quite a few. There was one, Mr. MacDowell, who was our maths teacher, and he was a great character. He used to be, at one stage, I think he was head of the boys' house, but when I was there, he wasn't. And he taught my father as well. And then Jerry Miles, the headmaster, he was very good. And I remember I went on to do nursing, and I never won a prize in my life in school. I was absolutely hopeless. But when I got into hospital, I managed to get some sort of a prize, and Jerry Miles wrote me a letter congratulating me, which I thought was absolutely amazing of him, that he even remembered who I was. So he was a good headmaster. And who else would I think of? Willie Devers, we called him. He taught us, your memorial cabinet is in memory of him. And he was a great teacher, but we were all terrified of him because he used to roar at us, but he was a very good teacher. And he was head of the junior boys' house, and junior boys all loved him.
Okay. Then you came back as a teacher then?
In 67.
In 67, okay.
Yeah.
And what did you teach then?
Mathematics. I was a civil engineer. My degree was in civil engineering. But I'd done a fair amount of maths in Wesley before, and the headmaster was keen that I should come back from Nigeria to take over from Mr. McDowell, who was a master then, maths master. But I said I'd come back when I'm finished. And each leave I came back. But I came back and started, but because I was an engineer, I had no dip ed. So I had to do my dip ed as a teacher of 10 years, I suppose, and do that and then finish that up. So my first 2 years, I started off in the old school, but this school had just foundation stones laid here in 65, I think it was. And I started off in the old school and then did 2 years there, and then we came up here. I taught maths all the time, but I also taught applied maths, and I introduced mechanical drawing because I'd got the civil engineering degree, although I'd never taught mechanical drawing. I'd do a lot of learning there because the standard in mechanical drawing in the school was far higher than engineering.
Okay.
So that I did mechanical drawing, so I taught those subjects. And then the maths block was opened at that time, during that time. In Wesley. We had 10 people qualified to teach mathematics, teaching West at that time, 10 maths teachers, 10 people teaching maths. And so it's one of the bigger departments in the school.
Yeah. I'm sure it still is now. So was it very different teaching here in Ballantyre versus teaching in Stephen's Green?
Well, the big thing I found is difficult. Out in Nigeria, I taught boys in a boys' school, very up to Cambridge level, A levels out in Nigeria at that time. We did modern maths in Nigeria 2 years before they did in Ireland. But I taught maths out there up to A levels. I'd only taught boys, and I'd only taught boys who were very, very keen to learn. None of them wanted to waste their parents' money. And so we had to go around and switching off the lights because they were so keen to learn. And so when I came back here, I was teaching boys and girls, many of whom boys didn't want to learn much.
Okay.
And so it's a big change from teaching in Nigeria. But we got on all right.
Yeah, okay. And then did you coach rugby when you came back?
Pardon?
Were you playing rugby or coaching rugby?
No, I didn't do anything like that at all. No. I played rugby, but I wasn't anything like that at all. No.
Okay.
No.
Did you notice many differences between kind of when you were a student in Stephen's Green versus kind of how Wesley had changed those 20 years later?
Yeah. We stayed in our own classroom up here. Down there they'd moved around the classroom, so we stayed in our own classroom, and we said that. It changed, so much changed now really from,
Yeah.
I mean, my daughter's here, has been here, and granddaughter,
Yeah.
so that it's so different.
Did you ever want to go back to Nigeria after you'd left and come here?
You know, I went back and I was made a chief out in Nigeria as a tribute, because one of my past pupils became a very senior chief out there, and when he was being crowned as senior chief, he got 5 of us from his past and were made all honorary chiefs, proper chiefs in Nigeria, and but that didn't affect. But we went back. It was so different. It was so different. We came out with Biafra War, and it was so different.
Yeah.
And it's sadly quite a corrupt country at present.
So what were your kind of general impressions of life as a student in Wesley?
Well, you had to learn to balance the demands of being a student in Trinity College, attending lectures, doing examinations and reading in the library or the reading room, with the demands of Wesley College expecting you to be on duty 1 or 2 days in the week, helping with games like rugby or cricket. That was so you had to juggle to fit those in. But Wesley College was very near Trinity College, so that had advantages. You just walked down Grafton Street from Stephen's Green.
And was it cold, or did you find that there was enough kind of, well, not central heating, but...
Yes, central heating wasn't overpowering in the old school. I think they had problems, say, with fuel, and coal wasn't always available. And I can remember there were stacks of turf, peat, at Bloomfield. So sometimes they had to burn turf in the fire, which didn't produce a great deal of heating in a central heating system.
Yeah.
But it wasn't impossible. Put on an extra sweater or wear your overcoat if you felt cold.
Okay. And what were your kind of impressions of the staff at that time?
Well, I think we highly respected the staff. There tended to be perhaps a gap between staff and students, which was normal for those times. But the staff on the whole were very helpful and very encouraging. There was a very limited amount of punishment and so on, so that I found I got on well with the staff.
And then when you came back here to teach, were you teaching
I was
in
teaching
Stephen's Green or here?
When I came back here, we were still, when I came back, Wesley College had bought this farm. I was in Nigeria teaching history and geography there. So when I came back, I was resident housemaster here, and we still went in every day to Stephen's Green for classes. So, and that lasted just about a year as the building was advancing, and then it was opened. We had a big public open, and over 1,000 people were here for the opening of the college. And such a big crowd turned up that one lady who had nothing to do with Wesley College found herself in a queue of cars, and she was ushered along by the Gardaí, and she was shown into the grounds here, and she was parked on the rugby pitch, but she didn't intend coming to Wesley College. It was so well organised.
Went from being a pupil in Wesley to then being a housemaster while you were studying, and then you went to Nigeria once you'd qualified.
Yes, I perhaps taught for 1 year.
In Nigeria, and then...
Yes, no, I taught in Wesley before I went,
qualified.
and gave me time to think what I wanted to do and to go for an interview. I had to go to London for an interview, but I came to the staff in Wesley College and thinking about what I would like to do. I had always had an interest in missionary work, and as my main subject was geography, I had an interest in seeing the rest of the world, so it seemed to look for a job in a school. I went to actually an Anglican school in northern Nigeria, so I had the advantage of seeing another country of the world, as well as learning about how people lived in that and seeing missionaries at work.
And at that time, you had secured a position in Wesley College, or did you take time off?
No, I took time off. Mr. Miles had said to me that there would be a job for me when I wanted to come back. And in fact, then after I was there about 4 years, I think, when there was a change in staff, so he contacted me to see was I ready to come back, that he wanted me to come at that time, and I did come back after the 4 years in Nigeria.
And in that time, the school had moved from Stephen's Green to the boarding houses were just here, was it?
No. They had bought the farm, the builders were in, and the boys, senior boarder boys, lived at Ludford in the accommodation that was there, and travelled each day in on a bus into school in Stephen's Green.
Wow, extraordinary.
Yes, it was extraordinary, and it was quite demanding.